We're just going to walk through the annotation guide. And this is a pretty straightforward video, more for those audio learners and who want visuals. This guide is available on the website, but I figure I'd walk you through my thinking behind each of the 10 symbols we offer. As to do this, though, I want to keep in mind, especially if you're in my class right now, by no means am I saying these are the 10 symbols you have to use. You can use whatever works for you. This is just the system that I suggest that I think covers a lot of bases and has been helpful for students in the past. So let's talk about the big three right off the bat, because these are the more obvious ones. Exclamation point for importance, question mark for any questions you have, and then theme or message. Here's this one I use the most because as I'm doing my first read, remember our annotations happen in the second read because basically the order is first read, roadmap, second read, annotate, third read, evaluate. So you already have read through first by the time you're doing your annotations if you're following our system. But when I'm doing my road mapping, remember I'm still underlining as I go, and a lot of times those underlines are just things I think are important. Then when I come back with my second time through, I look at where I underlined, and often I'm writing something like this off to the side because it shows Alexa has been deceiving Carlos all along, and I'm just doing this kind of explaining my thinking on the right side, and if something's super important, I'll toss the triple exclamation point, similar to question marks. And I might have underlined the first time or maybe the second time I had a question about something. The key thing is you got to write down what the question is. If you don't write the actual question marks really don't do you very much good. Remember, you got the triple question mark as another option for you. And then this one's big for theme and message. And this might not even happen until you get to the evaluate stage where I ask you to identify multiple themes. This doesn't just have to be for things that explicitly say the theme or message, though. You can actually use them for something that just gives you evidence that might help you explain whatever theme you're arguing for. So don't feel like it has to explicitly say what the message is. If it does come out and say what the theme is, probably want to toss a triple money sign on that. Then we get to these two arrows, the backwards and forwards. Backwards arrow is for a connection or illusion, something you've read earlier, especially let's say we're in a novel and it's something you've read in previous pages, or earlier it's referencing something that's happened earlier in the book. But allusion is actually something outside of the text where you're saying, hey, this alludes to maybe an event in history, something in our culture, maybe a famous myth. The sample here alludes to World War II and the nuclear bombs dropped on Japan. So that's a higher level skill if you can identify allusions in the text that we'll talk about this year in my class. Another one, if we flip that, it just becomes foreshadowing predictions. And all the times ask you just to stop and make predictions or a certain number of predictions as you go. That's just what the forward arrow is for. Then we get to, I would say, the more unique symbols. So let's start with the @ sign. This is just for setting details. Anytime you note, now please don't do this for all setting details, ones that are important or you think stand out to you for some reason, and you'll want to say what that reason is along here because you've got the setting detail underlined or highlighted, you throw the @ sign, now you're explaining what it might show you, why it might be important. So this is just a little bit more specific than the exclamation point earlier. Then we get to this guy, the shift sign. And what you're doing here, one of the skills we will work on this year is reading the text structurally. And what I mean by that is when is the text changing what it's doing? Could be tone, as we'll talk about on the next line, but it also could be, hey, the first 3 paragraphs are arguing this, then the text shifts to argue something different. Or maybe it shifts from making an argument to providing evidence. Or maybe, once again, you can go tone to mood, something like that. The shift works. You can also put an S for shift if you'd like, whatever works best for you. Then we get to this, the trademark symbol. I like the trademark symbol because T and M, tone and mood, is a specific thing we will learn to and build our skills at reading for. You can see I always specify if I'm looking at tone or mood. We'll go over that in class, but that's what the TM symbol is for. This one's a big guy, the characterization detail. If it's not a happy characterization, you can still use the happy sign, or if you want to put a sad face, that's fine. The biggest thing is, especially when you're reading literature, you want to be looking for details about characterization, and you really want to try to go under the surface, not just the things they explicitly say, but inferences you make and maybe even some deeper evaluations when we get to that point. Then our last one, figurative language. Basically, this covers the whole smorgasbord of different devices we talk about, from metaphor to simile to parallelism to anaphora. you want to specify what the device is, but you also want to say what you think it's doing. This is a skill we will push heavily on, especially in the latter half of the school year, but you want to take your first stab at it in your annotations. Then we get to just 4 reminders before I turn you loose. Just keep in mind, we do this process not just as busy work, but to help get our thinking on paper and engage with the text, and it aids in our discussion. So a lot of times I'll ask you to annotate and then share your annotations. Sometimes with a partner, someone across the room from you if we're up and out of our seats. So keep the purpose in mind as you do this. Also, sometimes we will do it with a novel or a text that doesn't have space to annotate, so I'll ask you to do it in your spirals or on a separate piece of notebook paper. You would do it like this, where you just draw a line down the center, and you can just write the textual evidence that you were highlighting or underlining or would have, and just do first 2 words, ... last 2 words, or if it's just a 2-word thing or a 1-word, that's fine. Then you throw the symbol and the annotation off to the right. This is one other way to get annotations if you don't want to do it on the text. Another reminder, don't just put symbols. You have to explain your thinking. If you only have symbols here and you haven't explained off to the right what they mean and what your thinkings are for them, then that does not work. And then the last thing is you need a variety. Try to stay away from just having only these 3. Instead, challenge yourself to try to get a variety. And if you're hitting the same ones over and over again, that's a clue that we want to develop our skills in these areas. And that might be a work in progress. You might find it harder to look for tone and mood early on, which is normal. But by the end of the year, the full 10 should be in your arsenal. So remember, this is for our second stage of analysis, or as we do our close reads, and that this document is available at the class blog if you want to review them. And as always, if you have questions, feel free to reach out and I will help you with this very important skill as a close reader. Thanks for stopping by.